Hi everyone, before I will cover the actual matter of today's video, I'd like you to subscribe to my BitChute channel in case if my YouTube account will get terminated. Although I hope it won't be the case since I'm following all of their guidelines, but in case if that happens, join my Discord and subscribe to my BitChute. Now let's get into the topic of today's video, and that is precisely the main logical flaw on the left that also happens to be another central commandment on which they are basing their whole ideology upon, besides of course deconstructing the West. What is it, you may ask? Well, it is a logical fallacy that had even been identified by David Hume way back in 1739. The famous is-at problem, and it results due to a person perceiving the world not through its actuality or how the world is, but rather through how the world should be, which often is influenced by a person's ideology and moral judgment. This fallacy is sometimes also called the moralistic fallacy, that can be best summarized as when the conclusion expresses what is based on only what one believes is ought to be and not what actually is. To illustrate that in a nutshell will be a statement like, warfare is destructive and tragic, and so it is not part of human nature, assuming that human nature of course is not destructive and tragic. Another example of that include a leftist who will reject the explanation to a lack of women's representation in STEM fields would involve saying that to a larger extent it has to deal with women's natural inclinations to not be interested in it. Why? For the same reason. The person comes with an assumption that men and women do not differ biologically, besides maybe secondary sex characteristics, but everything else is socially constructed. Another example would involve a conversation about race and the effects of ancestry on cognitive abilities, and the same will be here. The premise would be naturally rejected, as in the mind of the leftist, all people are equal and do not differ biologically, and race, just like a gender, is a social construct. The reason why both of those potential explanations were rejected by the leftist is not because they were incorrect, but because the leftist would like to think that everyone is equal, and it is that idea that ultimately trumps reality for them, and the is part is replaced with the ought part. However, what those leftists tend to forget is that ultimately the idea that we are equal is the ultimate example of a social construction that had trumped reality for many people and not just the leftists, and moreover it acts as a blocker towards receiving any other information that might contradict that social construction of reality. The worst part about it is that some of them really believe in that. About a year ago I have spoken with a co-worker of mine and we had a little argument, and at some point of time I brought up that men make up 90% of all violent offenders, and he had concluded that it's not because they are men, but because our culture emphasizes toxic masculinity. And nothing new. This is a standard explanation for a person who was socialized in a society which has socially constructed the narrative that all men were created equal. Therefore, for him and other people, it was impossible to assume that any social differences can be explained by people's biological differences. Unfortunately for him and many who think just like him, reality is not determined by their moral judgment, that is logically fallacious, as it reflects how they want to perceive reality, but not the reality itself. Now, I did not simply record this video to laugh at leftists' fallacious reasoning, there are plenty of other channels dedicated just for that, but rather I recorded it as a part of a right-wing strategy guide and exordium of right-wing people into the psyche of a leftist. I want more right-wingers to understand that and rightly identify this fallacy to the person you're debating with whenever they seem to mix their preferred conceptions of reality to how reality is in actuality, and whenever they reject some of your ideas about the world just because your ideas might have subjective unpleasant consequences for them. In case if that happens, tell them that they are committing a fallacy, and moreover, try to go deeper than just that and point to them that their fallacious reasoning was developed due to their socialization process, in which hegemonic powers essentially told them that they better not think the way you do, and by embracing moralistic fallacy, they actually happen to serve the ruling class. You need to break that and bring them back to reality, and ultimately remember that all that you are doing is liberating them from the circumstances that enslave them, if I were to paraphrase Max Horkheimer.